word. But let's find out how to fight fake news, which is obviously incredibly important to all of us these days. So Daniel, over to you.
Hi. So this is one of those talks where it's, some stranger comes on stage and says, hey, I made a thing in Python. That's really the extent of it. The stranger in this case is me. My name is Daniel Quinn. If you're looking for me on the internet, I am not the author, who's in his 60s by now, but you will find me as Daniel Quinn. That's the username pretty much everywhere, except Twitter. Back in like 2009, someone took the name and then just sat on it and did nothing. So if you work at Twitter and you want to steal it from him and give it to me, someone will use it, that would be awesome. But until then, you can find me as Daniel A.G. Quinn, which is not as great, but those are my middle initials. Anyway, this is a talk that I came up with, or rather a project that I came up with about a year ago. But before I tell you about the project itself, I kind of have to go into the problem, why it's a problem, what inspired me to write the thing, and then we'll talk about the technical bits. So the problem is it's fake news. Now, when we talk about fake news, that's one of those things that's it's sort of amorphous now. I mean, people are using it to mean all kinds of things, including news that they just don't like. But what I'm going to talk about is a little bit more next level than this. We're not talking about, just some blogger that's writing a story that's completely fabricated. What we're talking about is stuff that looks real, but isn't. The inspiration for it is a podcast that I listen to rather religiously. It's amazing. Is anyone here, hands up, familiar with Radiolab? Excellent. You guys have great taste. Radiolab is a great series because they talk about the intersection of science and technology with the modern world, specifically in how it relates to things like society and culture. And they did a story about a year ago now called Breaking News. And it was about how news is being fabricated and how you don't necessarily have the ability to trust what you're seeing online anymore. The first part of the segment was about audio. Everyone here is familiar with Adobe. They make Photoshop. Maybe Baidu, it's a big company in China. Both of these companies, and probably others out there, are actively working on what they're referring to as Photoshop for audio. And this particular segment, they had a guy walk up on a stage not much different from this one, where he had 20 minutes of recorded audio of one of the people on stage. And he literally went onto the screen, typed in a few words, and in that guy's voice, that was his voice spoke the words that showed up on the screen. Now, importantly, these weren't words that he said. There's a machine learning algorithm, some sort of magic that they're doing under the hood that's taking the sounds that you are creating when you talk, the various pauses that you tend to make, and interpolating that into an audio string that is eerily accurate. That freaked me out, so I kept listening. And of course, then they started talking about video. Now, this is porn. This is Gal Gadot. You might know her better as Wonder Woman. Of course, as far as I know, she's never actually done porn. If you look really carefully, you can sort of see how her face is sort of stapled on top of the actual porn star under the hood. Someone with consumer-grade hardware and software wrote some code that took various angles of Gadot's face through all of her various movies and grafted it onto the face of this actual porn star while she was doing her thing. Judging by the still, it's not great, but again, this is consumer grade, and it's just some dude in his house. Imagine what can be done with a massive budget that maybe, I don't know, a nation state or a terrorist group might have. So that's interesting and fun to talk about at the coffee table, but this is the part that really freaked me out. This is a video clip of Barack Obama giving a speech. Now, importantly, this speech, the audio that you're about to hear, as far as I know, is actually a speech that he gave. But the four talking heads, they're all fake. They, again, use machine learning to look at all of the various speeches that he gave over time, and then used a 3D model to represent Barack Obama while he gave this speech. And if you watch, you'll notice the various sort of tics and intonation, the way he shrugs, the way he talks, the way his head tilts, that's all there. It's not perfect, but it's getting there, and it's freaky. So where's the mouse? Goes over here. There we go. Let's see the audio work.
The auto industry. To help families refinance their homes, to invest in things like high-tech manufacturing, clean energy, and the infrastructure that creates good new jobs. Not to mention the job training that helps folks earn new skills to fill those jobs. The results are clear.
So I mean, you watched it, you knew this was fake to start, so it's not that convincing. But what if you saw this in someone else's Facebook feed, and it was saying something that sounded like something that you'd expect him to say? You would be more predisposed to believe it. And importantly, this technology doesn't get worse over time, it only gets better and more convincing. So by this point in the podcast, I was, rather nervous, but it was okay. We have a solution, they said. People are working on this. Unfortunately, the solution is everyone's favorite hammer. It's AI. Basically, what they've done is they've written a bot that knows what legit video looks like, and they know what fake video looks like. It does the comparison and looks for artifacts in the video and audio streams that say, no, this one looks fake, and it can spot that stuff, which is great if you're willing to wait the amount of time that it takes to crunch every video that comes through YouTube in an hour and run that through all of these AI algorithms. Maybe you'll crunch through that whole hour in about 3 weeks. On top of that, even if you had all of the electricity in the world and it was all free, and all the CPUs that you need to do all of that crunching, and that's all free, you still end up with this horrible arms race, right? Someone creates a fake, someone creates a bot to spot the fake, someone creates a better fake, someone has to create a better bot to spot the better fake, and on and on and on. The only thing that happens is everyone loses money, and the worst thing is the video's already circulated the globe in a few hours, and the news is already spread. So, given that I don't think that's a good enough solution, I decided I wanted to do better. I wrote a thing called Aletheia. I called it Aletheia because the word Aletheia means truth in Greek. My wife is Greek, so I'm hoping I scored a couple points there. Now, the angle I'm going for Aletheia here is we're leveraging our natural method for fake detection, which is reputation. Now, what does that mean? Some of you, hopefully a good chunk of you, are familiar with Daniela. I don't know if he's in the audience. I don't see him, but he's a cool guy. He's one of the organizers here. Say, for example, I had an axe to grind with Daniela, and I wanted to create a website that convinced you that Daniela is a filthy puppy kicker. He loves kicking puppies. In fact, I have audio that proves it. I have video that proves it. I have a video of him winding up and kicking a puppy right down the street. And I have audio of him drunkenly talking about how much he loves kicking puppies. And I put it up on my website, and then I share it on Twitter and Facebook. And then people who hate Daniela too, they're going to circulate it. But you're going to look at it and go, wait a minute. Hopefully, you're going to look at it and think, well, that's silly. Daniela doesn't kick puppies. This guy must be making it up. Now, the thing is, if you analyze in your head what transcribed in that conversation when you looked at the video sample and you decided whether or not it was real, you did not go to an AI algorithm to prove whether or not the video stream is legit. What you did is you used your social connection to the world. You know who Daniela is. You know his friends and family. You know his reputation. More importantly, who the hell am I? I'm just some guy who put some stuff on the internet. Why would you trust me? This is what I'm trying to reattach. The internet is full of disconnected data. Here is proof, but you don't know the proof is real. And the people offering the proof are disconnected. The people offering it, you have no idea where it's coming from. So, in other words, you may trust the person offering it or not, but you don't necessarily trust You don't necessarily know whether or not you trust the data that's being offered to you, but you do know whether or not you trust the institution or company that's showing it to you. But to put it another way, let's say you see a video on the BBC's website. Theresa May is declaring war. She's standing there in the House of Commons declaring war on the rest of the European Union. Well, you might believe it. I mean, it's the BBC, right? But what if it was InfoWars? Reputation matters, right? It's a question of whether or not the person offering this is someone that you would attribute a certain amount of trust. So in an age where evidence itself is suspect, when politicians can point to things and say, no, that's fake news, reputation becomes all the more important. So how does Aletheia work? So how many Star Trek nerds in the room? Just raise your hands. Okay, that's a little sad. We need more of you guys. What about Babylon 5? Well, the rest of you missing out. Babylon 5 is amazing. Anyway, all of these other TV shows, they have a standard trope. You see it all the time. Admiral pops up on a screen and says, Captain, I need you to go do this thing. It's crazy stupid, you're probably all gonna get killed. Captain says, no problem, hangs up the phone, walks onto the bridge and says, Admiral says jump, we all gotta go do this crazy thing. And then there's always someone who comes out and says, wait, Captain, how do we know that this transmission is real, right? How do you know that it hasn't been faked by the enemy? And the captain always says, Mr. Worf, I'm sorry, but this audio stream was encoded on a subchannel. It cannot be faked. It is guaranteed legitimate. Now, what does that mean? Well, basically, we're talking about key signing, right? We've signed the transmission, and we can verify that transmission because we have access to the public key. So all Aletheia is doing is, shoehorning this into file formats. Now, this is a two-part process. Signing, well, this is what your typical file looks like. Now, I can't use the laser pointy thing, so I'm just going to sort of have to do this. This big blue box here, that's what you would usually refer to as a file. If you're looking at an image, that's the pixel information or the color of the pixels or the placement of them. If it's an audio file, that's the waveform information. The green part there, that's the header information, the metadata. So for an image, we're talking about height and width. If it's an audio file, it might be the artist that created the song or the title of it or the track number or whatever. So all Aletheia does is we care about the blue part, that big box, the meat of the file, I'm calling it. And it's going to take your private key, mash it together, create a signature, and then take that signature and shoehorn it into the headers. Then, along with it, include the URL for your public key. Now, the final file is just a little bit bigger. It's about 2 kilobytes. But now this file has a traceable origin. You know that the file came from this domain, and that it hasn't been modified since it was signed. Oops, wrong direction. Verification is basically the opposite. We take the file that's already been signed. I don't know how you got it. You might have gotten it over email, so maybe someone uploaded it to your site. But regardless of how you got it, you take out the Aletheia line, and you get the public key location and the signature. We go over the internet using HTTPS because we're all encrypting our stuff now, right? And you get the public key, you combine it with the signature, and this meat of the file, and Aletheia tells you, looks good. It hasn't been modified, and I can guarantee you that it came from that domain. Or it says, signature looks rough. It's probably been modified. Or it says, I have no idea. This is just some dude on the internet's file. It has no signature. So that's the technical. Let's go with a story. Say that you are the New York Times, right? You have spent a year and countless hours of reporter time generating this super important story. You're heavily invested in it, and you're very proud of your work. So when you share it with the world, you want to make sure that not only are you sharing the information, but you're sharing your reputation with it. Your reputation for responsible for reporting or, I don't know, fact-checking, you're going to put that on with your content. So you put up on your site a bunch of images and audio, and you sign all the things with Aletheia. And then someone else comes along, they're browsing the website, and they're like, wow, this is a really interesting story. I want to share it on the Facebooks. So they download one of the images, and they go to Facebook, and they upload the image. And thankfully, Facebook is super awesome, and they've adopted this project, right? So they look at the file, and they go, wait a minute, this file has a line guaranteeing the origin. I can verify whether or not this file is A, legit, and B, comes from a particular place. So sure enough, they go through all the math, and they do the hash check, and it checks out. It's from the New York Times. Well, now I can put, I don't know if you can see it at the bottom there, I can brand each of the images that comes from the New York Times as verified from the New York Times. Now, what this does is it converts this blob of data, this timeline data, the Twitter feed, whatever it is, from a stream of data that comes from unknown sources and turns it into a stream of contextualized data. We know that this can be trusted because we trust the institution producing this data. So that's what it does. Progress so far. Well, there's a proof of concept in Bash. It sucks. Don't use it. If you're really curious where it came from, it's about 100 lines of Bash piping stuff into various things. But this is a Python conference, so let's talk Python. Right now, you can do pip install Aletheia. What this will give you is a simple program that will check sign and verify JPEG files, MP3 audio files, MKV, MP4, WebM video files, and HTML. But it's properly extensible. In fact, it's really easily to extend. There's a couple parts here. We've got you subclass something called file. That's a class that I've supplied. You define the MIME types that you want to support. You define how to get that blue part, the meat of the file. And then you define how to write the headers to sign the file, and how to read the headers, that is, to verify the file. That's it. That's the whole thing. Everything else is taken care of you. So if you have a favorite format that you'd like to make signable, literally, you're looking at maybe 50 lines of code. The project also comes with a command line utility, has 3 whole commands. 1, generate your keys. It was really important for me that the process of creating the keys was not something that people had to think too much about. A lot of people are freaked out by the idea of keys and cryptography, and you shouldn't have to. Basically, you just call generate, it puts the keys where they need to be. The signing process is straightforward. Aletheia sign, file name. You want to verify a file? Aletheia verify, file name. You can also go lower level into the code and actually call the modules directly, but command line is simple enough. And there's an example site. It's my site. You could go to my personal site, go to my image gallery, look through my vacation photos, and you can download a cute picture of my niece and then execute Aletheia to verify the file. It'll tell you it came from my site. Okay, so now we have a demo. I originally had this whole plan where I would take a picture of the audience and then sign it on the internet and then download it, and then, but no, this is a demo, and I wasn't sure if the internets would be working. So instead, I'm going to do this blind because I can't see the screen. Oh, I need to move the cursor. Where's my cursor? Over there. There we go. Okay. So I have 2 files here. One says signed, one says unsigned. Now, if you're familiar with EXIF tool, this is what the EXIF data or header data looks like for an image. It's pretty straightforward. You see things like the height and the width and the, well, other stuff that I can't see from here, but it's pretty straightforward, simple stuff. You run the same command on the unsigned file. Shows you the same data except for, well, you know, this big blob of stuff here. It's 1 line in the EXIF data that includes the signature, the location for the public key, and the schema version of the JSON blob in case I need to upgrade versions later. That's it. That's all there is to it. So let's see how it works. If we say Aletheia verify unsigned file, it's like, I don't know what this file is. It's just a file. I don't know if you can see the red, but I worked to get some color in there because I like pretty command line tools. You run the same thing on the signed file. Oh, look, it came from danielquinn.org. That's it. That's all there is to it. OK, so going back up here, and then move my mouse over this way. Oh, how about this way? Here we are. OK. Next steps. So now we know how it works. What am I planning on the future of this project? Well, I want to extend it. If this is going to be adopted, I need to support all the formats. Otherwise, people will be like, you know, we'd love to use it, but it doesn't do this thing. So I want to support ping. I would love to support GIF, especially animated GIFs are really common nowadays, but I can't. As far as I know, GIF doesn't have a metadata layer. If you know that I'm wrong, come talk to me afterwards, because I would love to support GIF. PDF, super important. Governments issue forms, legal organizations, they'll issue legal documents. Scientific journals will issue papers that have all been, wouldn't it be great if these have all been signed? Same thing for the various compression file formats. We distribute software. Wouldn't it be awesome if you could look at the piece of software and say, I know that this came from the people that I trust. I'm going to install it on my computer now. But I'm open to suggestions. I mean, AV1 is a format I'd like to get, but you know, if you have a file format that you would like to see signable, come talk to me. I also like to port it because, sadly, not everyone in the world is as lucky as we are to be using Python. Some of those people even have to use JavaScript. But I don't know enough about all of these languages to port it to all of those. But if Aletheia is going to be adopted, it needs to be usable with the various other systems that other people use out there. Now, I'm personally thinking I'm going to do the Rust port because I've been meaning to learn Rust. But if anyone else has some ideas or would like to fiddle, I'd like to talk. And then the last part, packaging. Turns out this is way harder than I thought. I tried for 2 weeks to write a package for Arch, and it mostly works. And then sometimes it doesn't, and I don't know why. And Arch is supposed to be the easy one. I have no idea how to do the rest of these. So again, if you have some skills in that area, I would love it if you could, pop onto GitHub and send me a message or something. So that's it for me, but before I sign off, I just want to say that I recognize that fake news is a serious problem. I recognize that this is the kind of thing that we need to solve in this generation because it will literally break our lines of communication on the internet. Governments are already using it as an excuse to undermine how we communicate on the internet. If we're going to do this, it needs to be done soon. I don't think the AI model is the way to do it. I think some form of public key signing is the best way. I'm happy to hear other alternatives. I don't really care about implementation, I care about results. But more importantly, the only way that something like this is going to work is if you all talk to your friends, especially the friends that work at news organizations or social media organizations. The people who are producing the stuff or the people distributing the stuff, they're the ones who are going to decide whether or not we produce content that is verifiable. So for that, I would ask that you talk to your friends. And that's it. Thanks very much.
Water. Okay, Daniel's happy to take a couple of questions if there are any. I will come running up to you. Well, not running, obviously. But I'll go here, then I'll come back. Please make some other questions.
Hi, thank you. My question is, what happens when you get signed by InfoWars? Right, this seems like it's a neat technical solution, but the problem isn't necessarily of the trust, it's trusting the wrong source.
Yep.
So how do we get around this kind of trust problem outside of this technical solution?
So it's interesting that you would frame it that way, because this is my favorite question. I intentionally don't answer it in the talk so that someone will ask it. So the important thing to know about Aletheia, it is not an authority system. You don't trust whether or not Aletheia has given the thumbs up to the thing that says this is true. Aletheia is just telling you that where it came from. That much you know. If you're talking to someone who honestly believes that there are child relocation centers on Mars, I can't help you. That is a social problem. I don't think we should try to solve that with technology. I think that's a fool's errand. So what Aletheia will do is it will allow someone from InfoWars to sign something and say guaranteed from InfoWars. It'll even let someone take content produced by the New York Times, remove the signature, and re-sign it as having come from InfoWars. But importantly, what it won't allow is creation of doctored information and saying the New York Times made this. The only one who can say the New York Times made this is the New York Times. So critically, what we're talking about is being able to assign the rightful origin of the company producing the content. I hope that helps.
You're effectively saying that if we trust the BBC, then we can trust what they're putting out.
Exactly,
We're not
yes.
trusting the content necessarily.
Yeah.
Mine was basically the same question.
Okay. They said they disagreed with the answer. Who was the other one? Sorry. Who was the other one? Oh, sorry.
Is there any way to impersonate someone else? Like, it seems like when you verified, it only, I saw your website, but could you impersonate someone else's website? As you say, maybe the New York Times. So it just kind of looks like it would be the New York Times, but would it be? How could you verify that?
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. Anyone can make a website that looks like the New York Times. The domain name is owned by the New York Times, and so long as you don't have states mucking with the domain name resolution process, which we've known some have in the past, that's more or less safe. There are ways to lock down your domain a little bit better with things like DNSSEC. But if you're talking more along the lines of, look, I've made a site, it looks like the New York Times, that's less of a concern. Because, for example, the example I gave about someone putting the article on Facebook, Facebook can look at the origin of the file and saying, okay, well, this comes from the New York Times. I have a list of companies that I know to be trusted, and I will, as the organization mediating the relationship, agree to include signatories. Now, Facebook wouldn't necessarily take an editorial view on that point. InfoWars could be on that list. I know that InfoWars is one of those companies. But another institution trying to create sort of those, over-the-night fakes that you spin up for a couple of days and then spin down, that kind of thing doesn't really work, because you can't link that to the New York Times. It's not the New York Times, right? Sorry, does that make any sense? Sort of? Yeah. I'm sorry, it's hard to explain, but basically, it's hard to impersonate something when you're really talking about the social link that we make with an organization. So if that organization, if the organization is sort of a fly-by-night, invented for a few days and then disappear, organizations like Facebook have no means of attaching it to that because it doesn't really exist. It's only been there for a couple of days. My guess is if I was Facebook or Twitter, I would have an application process. You'd have to create a website, prove that you have a track record of being around for a certain amount of time, and therefore you deserve to be one of the people who gets listed or something like that.
Cool. Thank you very much, Daniel. Another round of applause, please.